The sun had just slipped behind the tree line when he pulled into the small convenience store parking lot. He wasn't planning to stay long. Just grab a drink, call his sister back, head home, and end the day quietly. Quiet. That was all he ever really wanted these days. But sometimes life doesn't let quiet men stay quiet. The evening breeze rustled across the lot as he stepped out of his truck. A few customers were scattered near the entrance. Teenagers on skateboards, an older couple loading groceries into the trunk, a guy in a fast food uniform sitting on his motorcycle, scrolling through his phone. Nothing alarming. Nothing out of place, just an ordinary night. He walked toward the doors, one hand in his pocket, the other holding his car keys. Inside, he grabbed a bottle of water, a pack of gum, and headed to the cashier. The cashier, a young girl with nervous eyes, scanned his items. "You okay there?" he asked gently. She nodded a little too quickly. "Just a long shift," she said. He smiled politely, paid, took his bag, and stepped back out into the cool night air. That's when he saw the patrol SUV pulling in fast. Too fast for a place like this. Too confident. Too ready. He knew that kind of driving. He'd seen it before, many times, when he wore a badge himself. It had a certain arrogance, a certain "this is my moment" energy. He didn't know it yet, but two officers inside that SUV had already decided who he was. And who he wasn't. He walked toward his truck and noticed one of the teenagers glance at the incoming officers, then back at him. The kid nudged his friend. Both stepped out of the way quickly, like they knew trouble when they saw it. The patrol SUV cut across two parking spaces and stopped directly behind his truck, blocking him in. A spotlight snapped on, bright, warm, artificial sunlight cutting straight through the darkness. He shielded his eyes and let out a slow breath. He'd been pulled over before, sure. He'd dealt with overzealous local cops who had something to prove. But this felt different, more rehearsed, more eager, more coordinated. The driver's door opened. Out stepped Officer Brett, mid-40s, stocky build, thick mustache, the look of a man who should have retired years ago. On the passenger side, Officer Mercer climbed out, tall, rigid posture, jaw clenched so hard it looked painful. They didn't hesitate. They didn't greet him. They didn't observe. They advanced. He placed his water bottle on the hood, raised both hands slightly, showing he wasn't a threat. No sudden movement. No challenge. He'd done this 100 times before, back when he trained rookies on how to avoid unnecessary escalation. Funny how life circles back. "Evening, officers," he said calmly. Brett didn't answer. He went straight into barking mode. "Stop right there. Don't move." He froze exactly where he stood. Calm, steady, breathing even. Mercer flanked to the right, hand already hovering over his holster. A ridiculous display. Unnecessary, but familiar. "Put your hands where I can see them," Brett shouted. "My hands are up," he replied, voice as steady as a surgeon's. "Face away from us." He slowly turned, not resisting, not questioning, not giving them an excuse. The teenagers stood silently near their skateboards, eyes wide. The cashier inside pressed her face against the glass door, hand covering her mouth. The man on the motorcycle lifted his phone, recording discreetly. The atmosphere shifted from casual night breeze to tension so thick you could slice it. "What's the issue, officers?" he asked, not turning his head. Mercer spoke this time, sharp, edgy. "You match the description of a suspect." He closed his eyes for a brief second. That line, that tired line. "What's the description?" he asked calmly. Mercer stumbled. Brett interrupted. Just comply. He swallowed the frustration, the injustice, the old memories. He knew better than to lecture men like this about law or reason. They didn't come here for professionalism. This wasn't a stop. This wasn't a check. This was a performance they wanted to control. And they were about to learn they had picked the wrong role for him. He felt the cold metal of handcuffs snap around his wrists. No explanation, no pat-down, just cuffs. Fast, aggressive. The teenagers flinched. The older couple stopped loading groceries. The cashier ran outside, voice shaky. He didn't do anything. He just paid and left. Brett shut her down with a glare. Ma'am, step back or you'll be interfering. The girl recoiled, tears forming. His jaw tightened, not from fear, but disgust. He'd seen victims treated better than this. Officers, he said slowly, this isn't unlawful. Brett shoved him toward the SUV. Save it. Then Mercer added under his breath. You people are always running your mouth. A quiet anger slid into his chest. Cold, controlled, deadly precise. He didn't look back at Mercer. But Mercer definitely felt it. They placed him inside the cruiser, hands cuffed behind him, his back stiff against the plastic seat. Brett closed the door with unnecessary force. Another petty move. Through the tinted glass, he watched the scene unfold like a muted, distorted TV drama. People watching. Pause first for one moment. Then, again. Several points of focus. Then, one, raising a knee to breathe. Then, raising again. Then, another step in his preparation. The officers thought this was just another arrest. Another badge-boosting moment. Another ego trip. Our protagonist. Pause. No idea who they had just humiliated. No idea who they had just challenged. They had no idea that he had once taught federal agents how to avoid making exactly this kind of mistake. And they were about to learn. The long, painful way. Quiet men do not stay quiet when pushed too far. And tonight, they pushed the wrong man. The station smelled the way all small-town stations did. Stale coffee, old carpet, leftover frustration lingering in the air. He had forgotten how familiar that smell was. How many hours of his life had been spent walking through rooms like this, as the man in charge, not the man in cuffs. But tonight, they wanted him to play the opposite role. And he let them. For now, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead, as the officers marched him down the hallway, their footsteps echoing arrogantly, like they believed the sound alone proved they were in control. He kept his head still, posture relaxed, eyes forward, not intimidated, not shaken, just quietly observing, gathering information. That was one difference between him and these officers. They reacted. He assessed. When they pushed him into the interrogation room, the metal chair screeched against the floor. They wanted noise. They wanted discomfort. They wanted him off balance. He sat slowly, carefully, with a calm that unsettled them. He rested his cuffed hands on the table, shoulders relaxed, breathing steady, waiting. Mercer closed the door a little too hard, jaw tight, nostrils flaring, like he was preparing for a fight he hadn't thought through. Brett tossed a thin folder onto the table. Let's make this simple, Brett said. You tell us what you were doing at that store, and maybe this doesn't get worse. He didn't answer. Not yet. He watched them the way a seasoned chess player observes pieces being moved by someone who thinks they're playing checkers. Mercer crossed his arms. You think this is funny? You think staying quiet makes you look innocent? He finally lifted his eyes to Mercer. No, he said softly. It makes me look patient. That single line hit harder than any shouting could have. Mercer shifted uncomfortably. Brett pressed the folder open. No ID on you at the time of arrest. Suspicious behavior, refusal to comply, attempted evasion. He let out a slow, controlled breath. All of that is false. Brett smirked. Sure it is. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. Check the store's security footage. Or ask the cashier. Or the kids outside. Or the man on the motorcycle. Mercer shook his head. We don't need to check. Yes, he interrupted calmly. You do. His voice held that quiet authority that made even the room pause. He'd used that tone in briefing rooms, during crisis scenes, during hostage negotiations. He knew how to make a room listen without raising his voice, and they felt it. Both officers exchanged a quick glance, barely a second, but it revealed everything. Doubt, uncertainty, fear of what they didn't yet understand. Brett huffed. We know your type. What type is that? Guys who think they're smarter than the law. He straightened, eyes cold and sharp. I don't think I'm smarter than the law. I know I'm smarter than you. Mercer took a step forward. That right there? That attitude? That's why you got cuffed. No. His voice didn't rise. No, I got cuffed because you made assumptions before gathering information. He cocked his head slightly. You're not the law. A woman stepped inside. Mid-40s, crisp uniform, silver nameplate, Lieutenant Hale. Sharp eyes. Controlled posture. Someone who actually ran things. Officers, she said coolly. Outside. Now. Mercer tried to object. But ma'am, now. Both officers stepped out, shoulders stiff with panic. The moment the door closed, the room breathed again. She took the seat across from him, studying him with the kind of quiet scrutiny of someone who had done real work, real investigations, real leadership. She folded her hands. Mister, she paused. You haven't given your last name. He nodded. And I won't, until I know what kind of department I'm dealing with. She cracked the faintest smile. Fair enough. He met her eyes. Lieutenant, I don't belong here. And I don't mean that in the way your officers assumed. I mean it because the moment they ran my name, someone above them should have been notified. Her expression tightened slightly. So you are someone with clearance. He didn't confirm. He didn't deny. He simply said, You'll want to call the number tied to my file. I tried, she said carefully. It redirected. It always does, unless you request a secondary authorization. How do I do that? He gave her a slow, deliberate look. You ask me. Her eyes widened, just a hair, not fear. Recognition. She knew the protocols. Or at least enough of them to understand he wasn't bluffing. What exactly were you doing at that store? She asked. Buying water. And before that, driving home. And before that, living my life, he said quietly, trying to start over. She sat back. Something in the room shifted. Respect. Curiosity. The realization that this wasn't a normal civilian. She stood abruptly. I'll make the call. Before she left, she added, if you are who I think you are. My officers made the biggest mistake of their careers. He exhaled. Finally. Someone with sense. She stepped out, closing the door. He heard her voice echo down the hall. Firm, clipped, commanding. Clear the line. No one touches the suspect. No one speaks to him. Do not enter that room. The station suddenly became a hive of whispers. Panic. Confusion. Fear that they'd stepped in something bigger than they could handle. And they had. He leaned back in the metal chair, eyes on the ceiling, breathing slow and steady. He knew what came next. The call would go through. Someone, somewhere, someone high would pick up, and the first words out of their mouth would be, "Why is he in custody?" And then things would change. Fast, brutally, irreversibly. For the officers who cuffed him, and for whoever wanted him humiliated tonight. He closed his eyes. Not tired, just waiting. Because the real fallout, the one they weren't ready for, was about to begin. If you're ready for the next escalation, the phone call, the sudden shift in the station, and why the officers truly panic. The minutes after the lieutenant stepped out stretched like slow motion. He could hear the low hum of voices outside the door. Not confident voices, but uneasy ones. Officers shifting their weight, pages being shuffled, whispers tightening the air. Every now and then, someone peeked through the tiny window in the door to check if he was still sitting there, still calm, still not panicking like they expected. He sat perfectly still, hands folded, breathing steady, his expression unreadable. That alone unsettled them more than any shouting ever could. The lieutenant's voice rose, not angry, commanding, sharp, precise. Clear, a secure line. No, not that one. The encrypted channel. Yes, now. Officers glanced at each other, confused. Encrypted. For a simple. Suspicious person arrest. Nothing about this made sense to them. And that was the first sign their world was tilting. Period. And that was the first sign their world was tilting. Arpthil. You're both overthinking it. He was just acting. The lieutenant stepped back into the hallway, and all three snapped straight. She stared directly at Brett. Give me your report, now. He handed it over with shaking fingers. She read through it once. Then again. Her jaw tightened visibly. This, she said, waving the paper slowly, isn't even close to protocol. It's what happened, Brett muttered. She stepped closer, lowering her voice, but he still heard every word through the door. You escalated without cause. You ignored witnesses. You cuffed without probable suspicion. You fabricated half of this. Mercer stepped forward defensively. We followed training. No, she snapped. You followed your ego. Her glare cut straight through them. For your sake, pray the call I'm making goes smoothly. Pray he isn't who I think he is. That was the moment Brett's bravado collapsed completely. Inside the room, he waited. Still calm, still patient, still analyzing every sound. It wasn't the first time someone made calls about him, and it probably wouldn't be the last. But something about tonight bothered him. This wasn't random. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't officers acting independently. Someone wanted him stopped, humiliated, cornered. Someone who knew about his past, but not enough to understand how dangerous this move was. He leaned back slightly. His heartbeat stayed slow. His mind stayed sharp. Whatever had begun tonight, it wasn't ending here. The lieutenant finally made the call, her voice lowered, controlled. The tone officers use when speaking to someone far above their pay grade. This is Lieutenant Hale of Ridgeview PD. I'm requesting identity verification on a detainee. Secondary authorization required. Yes. Clearance code 8 Sierra. Longer than the officers expected. Longer than anyone liked. A mix of surprise and something else. Concern. I understand. Yes. I'll hold. For who? Who makes a lieutenant wait? I'll confirm immediately. She lowered the phone very slowly. eyes wide, hands tense. We can't just... She turned on him so fast, he flinched. You will open that door, uncuff him, and apologize. Not tomorrow. Not later. Now. Davis swallowed. What did they say about him? She closed the folder with trembling fingers. You don't need to know. But you don't want to know. Her voice held a sharp truth that made all three officers go pale. She straightened her uniform, steadied her breathing, and approached the interrogation room door. For the first time, she hesitated, just for a second, almost like she was preparing herself. Then she opened it. He turned his head slightly as she entered, not startled, not expectant, just acknowledging her presence. She cleared her throat. Sir, you're being released. He said nothing, just observed her carefully, waiting for the rest. Mercer stepped in behind her reluctantly, keys in hand, looking like a man walking into a lion's cage. Lieutenant Hale gestured, uncuff him. Mercer moved around him slowly, unlocking the cuffs with trembling hands. Didn't flinch, didn't shift. Apologize on behalf of this department. Your detainment was unjustified and improper. He nodded once, not forgiving, not angry, just acknowledging. Brett stepped forward awkwardly. Things escalated too fast. He cut him off quietly. Save the explanation. It won't change what happened. Brett froze. He walked past them, slow and steady, each step measured. Every officer in the hallway stopped and stared. Some whispered, some avoided eye contact. Some looked terrified. And he still hadn't raised his voice once. The lieutenant followed him to the exit. Sir, she began, there is something you should know. He turned slightly, listening. The call I made? Her voice tightened. It didn't go to any local agency. It went to a federal line, and they already knew your location before I said your name. His expression didn't change, but a shadow passed behind his eyes. She continued, softer. Someone wanted you stopped tonight. Someone who thought you were alone. You're not. He nodded slowly. Thank you. He stepped outside, the night air cool on his skin. He walked toward his truck, fully released, fully recognized, and far from finished. Because if someone had set this in motion, they'd try again. And this time, he wouldn't let it slide. The night felt colder when he stepped out of the station. Not because of the temperature, but because of what he now understood, hands steady on the keys as he unlocked the door. The station lights cast long shadows across the lot. His reflection looked back at him from the window. Calm face, steady eyes, but more alert than he'd been in months. He got in, closed the door, and reached for the ignition. But something caught his eye on the passenger seat. A small, folded piece of paper. White, clean, perfectly placed. Not blown in, not dropped, deliberately left. Every instinct, sharpened instantly. He didn't touch it yet. He scanned the mirrors. Lot empty. No movement. No shadows shifting where they shouldn't. Only then did he reach out and unfold the paper. 2 words. Written in black ink. In a handwriting he had seen before, years ago in reports, on briefings, on a desk he once worked beside. Stop digging. His breath caught, not in fear, but recognition. Memory. Shock. Someone from his past had touched his present. He folded the note again and slid it into his jacket pocket. The threat wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was worse. It was personal. And it meant only one thing. Whoever set him up, wasn't just local. He started the engine and drove off slowly, mind racing in silent calculation. He didn't panic. He didn't curse. He didn't let the adrenaline cloud his thoughts. He shifted into the focus he hadn't used in years. The kind of focus that once made him the deadliest problem solver in the room. Someone thought they could scare him back into silence. Someone thought he'd walk away if threatened. They didn't know him. Not anymore. When he reached home, everything felt off. The streetlights buzzed faintly. The breeze was still. Too still. He scanned the neighborhood with trained eyes. Porch lights, windows, parked cars, shadows behind hedges. Nothing immediately wrong. Nothing obvious. But his instincts didn't settle. He walked up the driveway and noticed the smallest detail. His mailbox was open. Not wide, not swinging, just cracked. A sliver, enough for someone with experience to know it had been touched. He didn't approach it, directly. He walked past, pretending not to see. Unlocked his front door quietly, stepped inside without turning on the lights. Inside, he stood perfectly still, listening, breathing slow. Body attuned to every creak, every shift in air pressure, every vibration in the floor. Nothing, no movement, but the unease remained. He turned on a single corner lamp. Warm, soft light spread across the living room, revealing everything exactly where he'd left it. But the silence felt wrong, not peaceful, watched. He locked the door behind him, set down his keys, and walked toward the kitchen. His phone buzzed. He checked it. Unknown number. No caller ID. One message. If you keep pushing, they'll bury you this time. He stared at the screen for a long moment. Not afraid. Not rattled. Just tired. In the way someone gets when ghosts from their past crawl out of the dark. He typed nothing back. He blocked a number. But he knew a block wouldn't stop whoever sent it. They weren't warning him. They were measuring him, watching if he would back down, seeing how strong he still was. He placed the phone on the counter, took a slow breath, and opened the mailbox outside. One envelope sat inside, plain, unmarked, no address, no stamp. He opened it, carefully. Inside was a single photo, grainy, black and white, clearly taken from a distance. It showed him in the grocery store parking lot earlier that evening. His truck, the officers, the teenagers, the cashier. The timestamp was before the SUV arrived. Someone was watching before the stop even began. A second photo slid out. Him walking into the store. The angle from across the street. Taken hours before the arrest. This wasn't random. This wasn't spur of the moment. Someone had monitored him, tracked him, planned this. And worst of all, they weren't hiding it. They wanted him to know they were watching. He stared at the pictures, jaw tightening. His life, his attempt at peace, had been violated before it even started. Tonight wasn't the officer's idea. They were pawns, following a voice on the radio. A voice that didn't belong to their department. A voice that slipped in, gave one order, and vanished as soon as he was in cuffs. That voice had everything to do with the envelope in his hand. He placed the pictures neatly on the table, then sat down, slowly, deliberately. Someone from his past career, someone with access. Someone resentful. Someone who hated that he walked away. They weren't just trying to scare him. They were trying to pull him back into a world he'd tried to escape. He would rise. Just like he always did. And whoever sent that note, "Stop digging," had just guaranteed he'd dig deeper than they ever intended. He picked up the envelope again. A faint scent clung to the paper. Something metallic. Something chemical. Something he recognized from old evidence rooms. Someone had used gloves. Professional ones. He leaned back, expression turning cold and sharp. This wasn't harassment. This wasn't intimidation. This was a move. A test. And he was done letting others write his story. If they wanted to drag him back into the shadows, they should have remembered one thing. He didn't come back the same man he once was. The house was quiet. Too quiet. He sat in the living room with the envelope laid out on the table in front of him. The photos arranged in a neat row, every frame a reminder that someone had gotten close enough to watch him without being seen. Someone skilled, someone bold. Outside, the street lamps buzzed softly. Inside, the only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator. Even the clock ticked slower than usual, each second dropping like a warning. He leaned back into the couch, fingers steepled under his chin, listening to the room breathe. He didn't turn on the TV, didn't distract himself, didn't look away from the door. He wanted silence. Silence always tells the truth if you wait long enough. And after nearly an hour, the truth arrived. A faint click, metal touching metal. Just once. Barely. But to him, it might as well have been thunder. Someone was outside his door. Not knocking, not speaking, working, trying to bypass the lock quietly. His spine straightened, breathing slowed, muscles loosened, not tensed, because tensing makes movement predictable. He stood without a sound, feet gliding across the carpet. Every step placed with purpose. The clicking stopped. A pause. A breath. A soft metallic whisper, the kind that comes from someone slipping a tool inside the latch. He moved to the hallway and reached for the single object he always kept accessible. A heavy brass flashlight. Not a weapon, technically, but in trained hands, more than enough. He approached the door, slowly, silently. The faintest shadow moved beneath the crack at the bottom. Silhouette. Careful. Focused. Professional. This wasn't a kid. Wasn't a prank. Wasn't someone curious. This was someone who knew what they were doing. The doorknob twitched gently. Then another click, this time deeper. They were seconds away from getting in. He stepped behind the door, back against the wall, hidden in the blind corner, where anyone entering wouldn't see him at first. The lock slid. The latch gave. The door opened half an inch. A thin beam of light cut through the darkness. A gloved hand entered first. Then a shoulder. Then the shape of a man leaning in carefully. He waited until the intruder committed. Not rushing. Not flinching. Timing was everything. The man stepped inside just enough, and that was when he moved. Silent, precise, explosive only at the moment of impact. He grabbed the intruder by the wrist, twisted it sharply, and slammed him face first against the wall in a single, practiced motion. The man grunted in pain, flashlight dropping from his hand. He tried to shove back, but the leverage wasn't his. Not tonight. Wrong house, he said quietly into the intruder's ear. The man fought harder, elbowing backward with surprising force. Good. This wasn't a low-level pawn. This was someone trained. The intruder spun, trying to break the hold, and he let him turn, just enough, using the momentum to pin the man to the floor, knee pressed between the shoulder blades. "Who sent you?" he asked calmly. No answer, just heavy breathing and stubborn silence. He pressed harder. "Say it." Still, nothing. The gloved hand reached for something inside his jacket. A knife? He reached into the intruder's jacket and pulled out a small black device. No buttons, no screen. Just a blinking green light. Not a weapon. A tracker. He held it in front of the intruder's face. "This how you plan to follow me next time?" Still no answer. He didn't need one. The silence confirmed everything. Someone didn't want him dead. Not yet. They wanted him monitored, pressured, controlled. That meant fear. Not his. Theirs. He stood, gripping the intruder's arm, and yanked him to his feet. The man staggered, but regained balance quickly. Too quickly for a civilian. "Tell whoever you work for," he said, voice dangerously soft. They picked the wrong man to corner. The intruder finally spoke. One sentence, strained through clenched teeth. He raised an eyebrow. "Stayed out of what?" But the man didn't answer again. Instead, he drove his shoulder into him suddenly, breaking free just long enough to sprint out the door and disappear into the night before he could chase him. He didn't run after him. He knew better. Chasing amateurs makes noise. Chasing professionals makes traps. He closed the door slowly. Locked it twice. Then picked up the little black device, still blinking in his hand. Then, whoever sent that man expected him to be asleep, weak, unprepared. They miscalculated. He set the tracker down on the table next to the photos. Another piece of the puzzle. Another insult. Another reason to dig deeper. He took a slow breath and exhaled. Whatever game had started tonight, he wasn't playing defense anymore. And somewhere out there, whoever issued the order to stop him had just confirmed they were terrified he'd uncover the truth. They should be. Morning crept in through the blinds like a slow confession. Thin lines of sunlight cut across the living room floor, sliding over the photos, the envelope, and the blinking tracker he had placed neatly on the table. He hadn't slept. He didn't need to. Years of training had taught him that clarity didn't always come from rest. Sometimes it came from silence. He sat on the edge of the couch, elbows resting on his knees, staring at the small device. It had stopped blinking hours ago, either timed or remotely shut off. Both possibilities meant one thing. This wasn't amateur work. This was planned precision. And whoever shut it off was still watching. He picked up the tracker, turning it slowly in his fingers, listening to every distant sound outside his house. A lawnmower 2 streets over. A delivery truck rumbling past. A neighbor calling their dog. Nothing suspicious. Nothing out of place. Yet everything felt different. The attack last night wasn't meant to injure him. It was meant to warn him, to steer him, to push him a direction he hadn't chosen. People only warn men who scare them. He placed the tracker down and stood. He had somewhere to go. He arrived at the station unannounced. No appointment. No call. Just walked through the doors with the kind of quiet authority that made the reception officer straighten instantly. "Is Lieutenant Hale in?" he asked calmly. The officer hesitated. "Yes, but she'll see me." He said it the same way he used to speak inside briefing rooms, With certainty. The officer swallowed and picked up the phone. A few seconds later, he hung up. Go ahead, sir. She's expecting you. He walked down the hallway, every officer he passed glancing at him with a mix of curiosity and fear. Rumors move fast. Even faster when nobody knows the truth. He knocked once on Hale's door and stepped in. She was standing behind her desk, uniform crisp, expression careful. Not nervous, just cautious, the way smart people get when they know the stakes. You came back sooner than I expected, she said. I didn't come to talk about last night, he replied. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Then what did you come for? He removed the tracker from his jacket and placed it gently on her desk. Hale stiffened. Where did you get this? Inside my home, he said quietly. After your officers let me go. She picked it up with a pen, turning it over. Professional grade. Her voice dropped. They'll see you check, and then you'll be on their list too. She froze. Then what do you expect me to do? He leaned forward, typing quickly, faster than she'd expected, using old command strings most officers didn't even know existed. Her eyes widened. You still remember all of that? He didn't answer. He pressed enter. The screen populated with encrypted logs, names blacked out, timestamps scrambled into unreadable strings. Layers of protection stacked on protection. Hale whispered, This is above anything I've accessed before. He scanned the page calmly. Some of the patterns he recognized, not the words, the structure. The way certain redactions were shaped. The way the system hid specific fields. Only one type of division used redactions like this. Only one type of clearance allowed this level of access. Only one type of group left this kind of fingerprint behind. End of frame. This wasn't a petty grudge. This wasn't a local officer acting out. This was someone with federal reach. The screen flickered suddenly, just once. Hale stepped back. What was that? He leaned in. They noticed someone accessed the log. You said they wouldn't. I said you doing it would put you on their radar. Me accessing it? He straightened. They've been watching me for months. The screen flickered again, and for half a second, a single line of text appeared before the encryption blocked it. Accessed by K. Rowan, Special Oversight Division. His pupils narrowed. Hale grabbed the edge of the desk. Rowan? Who is that? He closed his eyes. A name he hadn't heard in years. A name he hoped he'd never hear again. Kane Rowan, he said slowly. He used to run internal oversight before it got shut down. He was ambitious. Ambitious how? Hale asked. He looked at the tracker, at the cost of anyone standing in his way. Hale's voice lowered. And he's targeting you? Yes, he said. And he's not doing it alone. He walked out of Hale's office with a name burning in his mind. Kane Rowan, a man whose entire career revolved around secrets, manipulation, surveillance. The kind of power that never shows up in public, but controls everything behind the scenes. He reached his truck, opened the door, and froze. Another envelope sat on the driver's seat, identical to the first. He picked it up slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, precise, meant to provoke. You should have stayed out. This is bigger than you. Bigger than Hale. Bigger than anything you walked away from. Walk away again. No signature. No threats. No demands. Just instructions. Instructions he had no intention of following. He folded the note neatly and slid it into his jacket. His heartbeat stayed steady. His breathing stayed calm. But something new hardened inside him. Resolve. They wanted him to let go, to disappear, to be silent again. But he knew Kane Rowan. And if Kane was involved, then the danger wasn't coming, it was already here. He turned the key in the ignition. The engine rumbled, determined, just like him. He'd find out why they wanted him out, why they tracked him, why they targeted him, and most importantly, who else was helping Rowan. Because Rowan never worked alone. And the next move, it wouldn't be theirs. It would be his. By the time he pulled into the old industrial district, the sun was sinking behind the warehouses. Long shadows stretching across cracked concrete. Rusted metal siding glowing in the dying light. This was where people hid things. Secrets. Operations. Mistakes. And tonight, it was where he planned to end everything Kane Rowan had started. Not with force. Not with chaos. But with truth. The one weapon his enemies never knew how to fight. He parked his truck behind a loading dock, killed the engine, and waited. Quiet. Still. Prepared. Rowan wanted him to walk away. He'd done the opposite. He'd traced the tracker's ping. He'd accessed backdoor protocols Rowan probably didn't know he still remembered. He'd followed the redacted breadcrumb trail Rowan left, thinking no one would ever decode it. He had, and now he was here. Because if someone comes into your home, threatens your life, and watches you from the shadows, you finish it. You see it through. You don't run, not anymore. A door creaked open, slow, purposeful, like the person behind it wasn't afraid of being heard. Kane Rowan stepped into the loading bay, slim build, gray suit, hair perfectly combed. Face carved with the calm arrogance of a man who thought he was untouchable. He gave a cold smile. You always were predictable. He didn't move, just watched Rowan with steady, controlled silence. Rowan clasped his hands behind his back. I hoped you'd come alone. You always did your best work alone. He answered quietly. I didn't come to work. I came for the truth. Rowan chuckled softly. Oh, you still believe in truth? His smile widened. You left the program because you couldn't live with what we uncovered. Because you cared too much about morality. Someone had to, he said calmly. And look where it got you. Rowan stepped closer. You think that little incident with the local officers was random. You think I didn't know exactly where you'd be. He stayed silent, not giving Rowan the reaction he wanted. Rowan continued. I gave them that description. I told them to make it difficult. I told them to apply pressure. You were supposed to understand the message, Rowan's smile faltered. I know you accessed restricted files. I know you had someone plant a tracker. I know you ordered that break-in. Rowan's face tensed, but he recovered quickly. You should have stayed gone, he said coldly. Something that doesn't need relics like you interfering. He raised an eyebrow. Powerful? You're hiding in an abandoned warehouse giving orders to small-town officers. You're not powerful. You're cornered. Rowan snapped. Cornered? Do you have any idea what you're dealing with? Yes, he replied calmly. A man who thinks pulling strings makes him a puppeteer. Rowan stiffened. You always did think you were better than everyone. No, he said softly. I just stopped pretending. Rowan pulled out a phone. You know what this is? No. It's proof, Rowan hissed. Proof that you were involved in classified operations. Proof that you walked away. Proof I can leak to anyone I choose. He didn't flinch. Do it. Rowan blinked. What? Do it, he repeated. Go ahead. Leak my file. Expose everything. Rowan's confidence shook. That's not how this works. That's exactly how this works, he said firmly. You think I'm afraid of losing something? I lost everything the day I walked away from your divisions. And I rebuilt my life from scratch. Rowan's composure slipped. You're bluffing. No, he said quietly. You are. Rowan stepped back. I have leverage. You had leverage, he corrected. Until I realized your real fear. Rowan froze. His silence was confirmation. You're being investigated, he said. You accessed my file because you needed someone to blame when your operation collapses. Rowan's face drained of color. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I do. He stepped close enough to look Rowan directly in the eye. That encrypted log you thought only you could see? I saw the audit trail. You're using division resources off the record. You're moving assets illegally. Rowan's fingers trembled around the phone. You're scared the hammer is coming down, he said softly. Scared the board will find out. Scared you won't be the one writing the ending. A long, heavy silence fell. Rowan finally exhaled a shaky breath. You've ruined everything, he whispered. No, he replied firmly. You ruined everything when you sent those officers after me. Rowan lowered his head. You can't prove anything. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the tracker, the little black device Rowan's man had left in his house. This, he said, holding it between two fingers, was registered through a procurement department tied directly to your oversight budget. Rowan's face collapsed. He added, I already gave the serial number to someone who knows how to follow that trail. Rowan staggered back, shoulders shaking. It was the first moment he looked human. Small. Breakable. Please, Rowan whispered. You know what they'll do to me, X.P. He stepped forward once more. No, Rowan, he said quietly. You did this to yourself. You chose power over people, control over truth, manipulation over peace. Rowan backed against the wall, breathing hard. You're finished, he said. Not loud, not threatening, just factual, final. Rowan dropped the phone. It clattered to the ground. He didn't pick it up. And that was how he knew it was over. Not victorious, not proud, just done. Some battles aren't about winning. They're about ending the things that should have ended long ago. Tonight, he ended Rowan. Not with violence, not with force, but with truth. The one thing Rowan couldn't manipulate. Outside, the wind brushed against his jacket as he stepped into the open air. The warehouse behind him felt lighter somehow. Like a shadow that had finally lost its power. He didn't look back. There was no need. He'd reclaimed his life. And whoever tried to bury him had forgotten something important. You can't bury a man who has already walked through the darkest parts of his past and come out stronger. If you enjoyed this powerful story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps bring more emotional, cinematic stories like this to life. Stay tuned for the next chapter, and remember, sometimes the quietest person in the room has the loudest truth.